Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and it's been 703 days since the Demons were last ensconced in the top four, and it is so nice and unexpected to be back amongst the top echelons of the competition. May our reign at the top end of the table continue. Joining me tonight to dissect our comprehensive victory on ANZAC Eve at the MCG is George. Good evening, and thank you for holding down the fort while I was on sabbatical.
Yes, so welcome back to Andy. I'm sure the listeners prefer his voice to mine, but hopefully Andy's MFCSS is in remission this week after that great win. But unfortunately, he missed the great spectacle that is the ANZAC Eve game. And I think it's a far more moving experience than in the daytime Collingwood-Essendon game. So, it becomes ours next year, but it'll be good to look forward to. But it's a great night for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic night. I'm just sorry I wasn't able to be there. It was extremely terrible trip management on my behalf. I actually had, when planning the trip and everything, I had assumed that I was going to be back for ANZAC Eve, and it turns out that ANZAC Eve isn't the 25th of April. It is the 24th, and I just buggered that one up. So I apologise to myself because I only have myself to blame for that. But yeah, it is such a great event on the calendar, and I hope we continue to have that, because it sounds like, according to Kane Corns, he wants Essendon to be stripped of Anzac Day. We can talk about that later. Also joining us tonight to bring us all the stats that matter is Bimman. Good evening, Bimman. A big thank you to you as well for keeping my seat warm, as well as giving me extra work to do while I was on holiday. So thank you very much for that. My wife thanks you.
My pleasure, Andy. She probably does say you're out of her hair, actually.
I'm sure she did.
Welcome back. Good to have you back on board. You missed one game that was very missable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have not seen a second of it.
Of the Essendon game.
Yep.
But you missed two of the best victories in many a year. And
I didn't miss them. I watched both of those, but yes, I did miss them.
Well, really one. I mean, the Richmond one was. So the Lions one was just a fantastic victory. And similar, this one was similar in the sense that, I don't know about you, George, I'm assuming you went, obviously. We'll unpack it in a bit, but it was a funny experience in a way, going back to time, years when we were winning most of our games of footy, and you went in expecting to win. But you could tell from the get-go the big difference between this game and the Essendon game. This was obviously a potential banana peel game, but as I said on this podcast last week and on the Stats File podcast on Friday, I have little doubt that they set themselves for this double, for the Lions Richmond double. And you could tell right from the first 10 minutes that we were, lots of people hate this phrase, but we'd come to play, whereas that was clear that we hadn't. That lethargy that King talked about in his post-match presser, wasn't there at all. And so I was confident, you can get a real handle on a game, I reckon, in the first 10 minutes. And, sometimes they'll turn it around like we did against the Blues, for instance. But, in terms of intensity, it's either there or it's not there. And it was definitely there for this Richmond game. And our noses were in front. We'll unpack a bit. I thought they played really, actually quite well for big chunks of the game. And noses were in front, but I never really felt like we were going to lose that game. Whereas in the second half of Essendon, I was really thinking, I was worried about us losing that game. So echo George's comments. It was absolutely, awesome for being at the ground. The top of the Ponsford was open, and it wasn't open against Brisbane, and it was in this game. You could sit anywhere. The conditions were great. The general admission was open upstairs. Looked fantastic. Had seats, plenty of space around, and never had that feeling we're going to lose the game. And it was a really entertaining game of footy. And as George said, the whole atmosphere is awesome. I think, with when the lights go out and the camera phones and the horse with is it the Eternal Flame?
No, it can't be.
Is that's what it's called? No,
Yeah,
it's not eternal, though, is it?
It's taken from the eternal flame at the shrine. They
That's
transport it
right.
down.
Okay, yeah, they showed that video. So it's a flame from the eternal flame. That's sort of a franchise flame. But yeah, it was a really moving night and a really entertaining game of footy to watch, actually. So was last week as well. And by the way, can I just say how dapper you look in your outfit? Can I ask, is that original 80s tracksuit top, or is it the new one that I've seen kicking around?
It would be 90s, I would assume. But
90s,
it is a 2026 version of a 90s look. That's the one. It's the flame head. They had them for sale on the website. I actually purchased it for my trip to Japan. And I even purchased, and stupid me, thinking, and this was a week and a half before I was leaving, I paid for the express shipping and it arrived while I was away. So I didn't get to wear it. I wanted to wear this around Japan to show the Japanese what, Australian 90s fashion's all about. But sadly,
I'm glad it didn't arrive, Andy. Can I say that? But speaking of which, if anyone from the Melbourne Footy Club is listening to this, for the 5th year in a row, I've yet to receive my membership pack or my bloody physical card. Every single year for the last 5 years, I've had to call the club and say, look, I specifically asked for a card because I want a card. I don't want to have to use my telephone to go through. Please, can I have it sent out? So if you happen to be listening to this MFC membership department, please send Bin Man his membership pack and his physical card.
Why do you object to using the phone? I like the card as well.
I like the card because it's always in my wallet, and my battery on my phone dies. Ticket tech drives me nuts. It's like any number of reasons. But it's
the way of the future. I mean, I don't really take a wallet out with me anymore. The only time I take a wallet out is to the footy because the bloody Mikey card is not on your phone. As soon as that Mikey card goes on your phone, or you can tap like everywhere else in the world and pay with your credit card on a train or a public transport, then I won't need a wallet anymore.
Well, Way of the Future says the man wearing a 90s inspired tracksuit top. So the way of the future is actually having a backup plan for when everything goes to murder.
Well,
and so a physical card will get me in when your phone gets stolen.
You will not be able to buy food. You'll not be able to buy food at the MCG if everything goes down because they don't accept cash.
Well, they accept my card. They accept my Melbourne membership card.
Yeah. All right, let's get into it. Each week, I invite our loyal listeners, I haven't done this for a while, to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we do appreciate your feedback. And as token of our gratitude, we'll give a well-deserved shout-out to those who take the time to share. And JT Smasher writes, Stats Files feedback. This is for you, big man. I want to say that the addition of the Stats Files as a standalone podcast is fantastic, but I think it can be upgraded in a couple of ways. Yes, it is niche, but if you click on a Stats Files podcast, you are in the niche and want at least an hour of Bin Man dribble. Please don't apologise for taking an hour. Make it at least an hour to handle the topics well. With the additional time, can you please ask Bin Man to slow down his speech just a little bit to make it fewer mistakes and be easier to follow? I think I fall for that as well. Tend to speak quite quickly at times. To help with that, make sections with mini headings so that Bin can take a break, catch himself and start again. In addition, the sections can just be pre-written titles to make sure every key element is hit. Thanks for making some more work for me, mate. I'm very positive about the changes to the podcast overall, and if anything, want you to try to be a little bolder in the decisions you are making. Keep up the good work. Thank you for the feedback, JT. It's much appreciated. We'll take it on board. And Bin Man, I'm sure you'll take some of that feedback on board and slow it down.
Great. No, that's really. We'll take that feedback on board, Andy. And
it is hard. We're not professionals. We don't.
Well, no, that's fair enough. And I guess with the Stats File podcast, just as a bit of context, is we hadn't even discussed it the day before I did it, so it was a new thing, and we're just finding our way whether it works. So the plan will be to do this show, the main show, on the Monday, and we review the game, and then to upload a preview on the Friday ahead of the game on the weekend, which will be a statistical review of the previous game, but more of a preview of the upcoming game, and we'll aim to have that by out 10 a.m. every Friday morning, something like that, with this show on the Monday. And I take on board that feedback. Definitely the rushing, and the reason for the rushing is I'm trying to keep it under 40 minutes. So maybe will relax. But it's a very good point. Anyone who ever even clicks on that is by definition up for listening to something, but pretty niche. So I don't know about an hour. So 30 to 40 minutes is what I'm aiming, but I definitely will slow down. I've just got so much interesting stuff to say, Andy. Right. I want to cram it all in.
I understand. Molly Agul Boy writes, great to hear the David Bridie version of It's a Grand Old Flag on the Demonland podcast. 10 out of 10 from me. Well, thanks, Molly Agul Boy. I just love that version of It's a Grand Old Flag by David Bridie. It's from the Marngrook Footy Show. You can find it on YouTube. It's a great rendition of the song. So keep that feedback coming in 2026. Simply leave us a 5-star review and a comment on our Apple Podcast, and we do give you that shout out on the show. Don't forget to look out for Big Man Stats Files podcast during the week. It's probably going to be later in the week, probably on a Friday, as he just said. It's a companion podcast to this Demonland podcast universe. And Big Man, as he said, breaks down the stats that matter each and every week. It's a long-form deep dive into the numbers behind the game and the ones that help tell the story of a brilliant win or a disappointing loss. And, the last few weeks, as we discussed, you're going to try and do a bit of a deep dive on the results of the last game and into a preview of the upcoming game. So you can find Big Man Stats Files in the Demonland podcast feed, usually dropping later in the week. In May, I'll also be posting a very special Demonland podcast that chronicles the 1926 Premiership season. Whispering Jack sat down and had a conversation with Ian Munro, who's a journalist and is an author of the book Between the Flags, Making Sense of 57 Years of Heartache. And Ian takes us on a journey through the 1926 season and the road that led to the Demons, or I should say the Fuchsias, to the club's second premiership. He brings this remarkable period to life, guiding us through the people, the moments, and the stories behind that unforgettable day in October that remains forever etched in the history of our club. So stay tuned for our presentation of The Spirit of 26 that's coming in May, which is a couple of days away. So you can find that wherever you get this podcast. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. And if you want to leave feedback, ask a question, share a comment for the show, jump into our weekly podcast post or send us a DM. And don't worry, we won't read your full name on the air. And you can listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcasting app, and just search for Demonland Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe. And to connect with fellow D supporters, head on over to our forum at demonland.com. Sign up for free. You can join in the conversation with fellow D's fans from across Australia and around the world. Want to call into the show tonight live? Give us a call on 0486 387 929. And that number again is 0486 387 929. If you're listening live on your phone via demonland.com, just hit the call button that's at the top of the page. It should automatically call from your phone app during the week. Give that number a call. Leave us a message for us to play on the podcast. And during the week, those calls go straight through to voicemail, so you're not going to have to speak to a human. You can listen to the podcast live every week at demonland.com on Monday nights at 8 p.m. And I know that it's 9 p.m. tonight, but we may be back to regular scheduled programming shortly. B-Man, your stats files. Shouldn't talk so quickly. Sorry, JT. And don't forget to check your podcast feeds in the coming days for the standalone Stats Files podcast. So, Big Man, take it away.
On Friday. So, this was a really interesting game in terms of the quarter by quarter stats. I'll rewind a little bit, but I said on the Stats File podcast on Friday, my preview of this game is that I just think we'd have too many legs for them and that we'd end up running away with the game and winning by 50-plus points. So I was really pleased that we did end up winning by 50-plus points because that sort of panned out much how I thought it might. On the Demonland Footy Forum, there's the Stats File 2026 thread, which has got the stats for each month put up by Willow Ratings. And this season, he's also started putting up quarter-by-quarter stats. Well, in fact, just for the last couple of games, And they're really interesting, and they were really interesting to look at last week in terms of our game against the Lions, and what part of the game did we sort of get on top? And clearly, for instance, the number of disposals, for instance, the Lions, dropped. The number of uncontested disposals dropped off after half time, which pointed to some of our strategy. This one, though, was really interesting. The quarter-by-quarter stats in this game were particularly useful, I thought, because in particular around contested possession and ball-winning equity points, because all our total numbers, the total numbers across all of the key statistical categories, including equity points, which is the rating points for the players get aggregated up, so for how you win the ball and how you use the ball, were completely skewed by blowout numbers in that last quarter. So Uze made that point in his post-match presser. He said that in the presser that the Tigers' focus coming into the game was winning contests and stoppages, that they're a contest and stoppage team, and that was the focus that they brought into the game. And he noted correctly that they did that for a big chunk of the game. For the first three quarters, that they matched us in our contest numbers. They matched us at the stoppages, despite, and we'll get to that later, Heath having a good game and Maxi was a bit off. We didn't, they were matched us for clearance scores from clearances, scores from stoppages. In all of the contested number matched us for ball winning, so that's the contest. But they just didn't have the legs to run out the game. You could see that, and they were starting to run up and down on the spot. And so that last quarter, if you go on to Demonland and have a look at it, you can see the last quarter stats just completely and utterly blew out. So, in terms of looking at this game, like where we won or lost it was really very level. The stats were all level. The score was pretty much level at 3/4 time. So, for example, just running through some of the sort of just a number of one to highlight my points, we had minus in the first quarter, we had 5 less disposals than them, 2 less in the second quarter. We had 12 less disposals than the Tigers in the third quarter. In the last quarter, we were plus 38 for disposals. And it was really looking like our games last year when it was evident we were running out of puff. And you can see that with the Blues. The same patterns happening with the Blues. And I'm convinced it's a fitness issue or, running power. Contested possessions is even more stark. In the first quarter, same number of contested possessions. Second quarter, we had 1 fewer. Third quarter, we had 2 more contested possessions than them, which is the point that Uze was making in his presser. That was their focus. They were level pretty much at 3/4 time. Their focus was winning the contest. They had up until they'd matched us at 3/4 time. In the last quarter, we were plus 20 for contested possession. So pretty much even for the entire game up to the last quarter when we smashed them. Similarly, for uncontested possessions, we were down 8 in the first quarter, even in the second, down 15 for uncontested possessions in the third, plus 21 for uncontested possessions in the last, and on it goes with that. So, for instance, shots a goal, we had 9 more than them in the last quarter. And so it really, the equity points for ball use, for possession was, so the equity points are the player rating points that each player gets aggregated up for the entire team. So the points that our team got for against them for winning the footy in the contest was negative 1.8 in the first quarter, plus 5.4 in the second, down 0.4 in the 0.4 points in the third. In the last quarter, we were plus 17.9 equity points for winning the ball. And almost as stark, equity ball use points for how you use the ball. In the first quarter, negative 1, negative 0.1, plus 5.4 in the second, plus 2.6 equity points in the third. That jumped up to plus 14.7 points in the last quarter. So it's really, it's for me, it really demonstrates that match. You can look at the stats in totality, but they're so skewed by that last quarter that it makes it a little bit difficult to, you can't look at all of the in totality. You've got to look at those first 3 quarters. And he's completely and utterly right, Uze, is that they fell, that they fell not in a heap in the last quarter. Their pressure rating was actually pretty good in terms of right through the match. I'll speak to that in a second. I made this point on the pod, on the Stats File pod, and it was true for us last year. It's true for Carlton at the moment. It's true for the Dogs as well. They've got 12 of their starting 23 not playing at the moment. That obviously hurts talent-wise. There's no question of that, but it also impacts their ability to, be at optimal fitness, because 12 of your best 22, not only are they best players, they're also probably the ones with the best athletic profile, the ones in best condition, multiple pre-seasons under the belt. You take them out of out of that team, and which is why I was so confident about a 50-plus win, a point-plus win, because I knew that they wouldn't be able to run out the game. And once the game had started, and it was clear that we brought all of that. That prediction was predicated on us bringing AFL level intensity, which we didn't in the Essendon game, the other banana peel game. We did in this game right from the get-go. I was, even at level at three-quarter time, I was confident we'd win by 50 points plus, because I was confident that the Tigers wouldn't be able to run that game out, and that's how it occurred. So they fell off a cliff stats-wise in the last quarter, but they were, I think credit where it's due. They really worked hard for that entire match. I thought, even when they ran out of puff coming into the last quarter. Player ratings, so player ratings measure impact, scoreboard impact. The top five, no surprise who's number one. There is a surprise who wasn't in our top seven, which was Maxi Gawn, but I'll get to him. Kozzy, amazing game of footy, 27.5 points, player rating points, 20 is considered an All-Australian level elite game of footy. He was on the ground for 80% of the time. Consistent right across the full four quarters, but 11 points he got in the second quarter. Remembering these points are basically a measure of scoreboard impact, so influence on your team's capacity to score. What's really notable about his game is his numbers. I've made this point before, but his 7.8 of his points that he got were for winning the ball, how he won the ball in the contest. Team high use of the ball points, 15.7. The next player, so for just equity points for how he used the footy, was Fritter with 10.1. So he wins his own footy. Only one, two. Kay Chandler had 7.8 points for winning the ball. Daniel Turner had 8.5. And Maxi Gawn, bananas of his, he ended up with 11.7 player rating points in this game. 14.9 of them were for how he won the footy. Negative 1.9 of them were for how he used the footy. So with Kozzy, only one player had, two players had more points for him for how he won the ball, and no player came close to him for points for how he used the ball. What an amazing combination of skills, and there's a question about him later, and I've got some thoughts about that. So Kozzy, Fritter, number two, his best game for a while, 19.2. Love him playing on the wing. Love him kicking inside 50. His ball use reflects that, 10.1. Caleb Windsor was third on ball use, 9.8. He was our fourth rated player. Tommy Sparrow, I've got to find this out, I keep saying this, but I wouldn't mind betting this is his highest ever player rating, 19.2. 72% game time, 7.1 for ball winning, 8 points for ball use. That's a great split between those two things. Kay Chandler rounds out, Caleb Windsor was 4, and Kay Chandler rounds out the top 5. Just notably, Harry Sharp, he was 7th, highest rated player, 14.2. Fantastic performance. I heard a couple of weeks ago, or read 2 weeks ago, he was, from last year, the third most improved player for these rating points of any player in the AFL. That's super impressive. Maxi Gawn, just a notable one. He was 1, 2, 3. He's our 9th rated player. First time he's been out the top 5 for the entire season. I know he got a hit. Be interested in your guys' take on this. I know he got a hit to the lower thingo, but I had binoculars on him for a big chunk of the game. He looked sick, I reckon. He played a bit like that too. So down the bottom, other end.
He was clearly injured, or had caught from the knock. That he looked hampered the whole time. That was from watching on TV.
Yeah, so maybe that's what I saw, and he looked irritated. Maybe that was it. But he also looked off from the get-go. Van Ruyen, he had a negative 1.6. Latrell, there's a question about him. It's a good question. Was second last with 1 point. Jacob Van Ruyen had 2 points Latrell was our second lowest rated player, 2.9. And Harvey Langford, after his heroics last week, came back to earth, 3.2, which probably points to the challenges for these young players being up every week. It's a tough gig for them. I mentioned the pressure. It was a much higher pressure game than last week, which was something like 157, 155. A point that Fagan made in his presser, and a point that he made apparently to the team for this week's game. And if you watch that game against the Suns, they spifflicated them right from the get-go in terms of, the Crows they played, didn't they? Their intensity of the ball was amazing. The last quarter, this was super impressive. We are running out games. I've used this as a proxy for fitness. I think it's about the best one, to be honest, in terms of the available data. 186 our pressure rating was. Remembering 180 is AFL average, 200 at elite. They were still pretty good in the last quarter. They were 172, but that was by far, we were plus 14. We were 195 in the second, plus 9. So 177 to 174 for the match, which is the way footy is at the moment, that's a high pressure rating. Interestingly, expected scores, I've made this point a number of times this season, and it's continuing to be true. I'm going to ask Willow what his take on this is. Another game where our expected score and our opponents was above our actual score was above the expected score. Every single game we've played so far this year, our score has been above the expected score, as has our opponents. So this week, our expected score was 114.3. Our actual score was 126. Richmond's expected score was 63.5 and their actual score was 72. So we won by a little bit more on expected score.
Just on that, because we really haven't talked about it this year, and it was something that is a sore point for all of us in the last few years, was our accuracy and the expected score, and we lost 2 finals. It cost ourselves maybe a flag because of our inaccuracy and inability. Forget the inside 50 stuff, and we can talk about that at another stage. But the accuracy was a big problem for us. What's changed this year, in your opinion? Because we're not missing much. I mean, we probably
it's pretty easy, Andy. The game's changed. The speed at which this is across all teams. We're seeing above 100-point win scores regularly from all sorts of teams.
But we're still having set shots that we were missing.
But the shots are coming from easy locations because the ball's going in there so easily.
Yeah,
people aren't kicking goals from the boundary like they were, or under pressure like they were. The ball's coming in so much easier.
Except for Myercheck, who's nailing them from.
Well, he can do it from anywhere, yeah. But it's the way the game's being played.
Yeah. All right, that's good answer.
Partially true, but not fully true, because that the expected score weights that. That's the whole point about the expected score. It looks at every single kick where it's taken from the ground. Otherwise, you would have a much bigger disparity between much closer between the expected score and the score. That's partially true, George, because we're getting Joe the Goose goals from the goal square, or goals from the corridor. That's more the game plan moves quick, and then you can get it into the corridor. And we're still like against the Suns. If you look at the Stats Bowl thread. Willow also posts his tweet that he does weekly about where the goals are from, and so whilst there's been some increase in them being from the corridor, it's not like it's an overwhelming number. He was asked that while you were away. Goody was asked about who our goal kicking coach is after we kicked 12 straight against
Goody or the new.
Who did I say? Sorry, flashback. Sorry,
Chaplin.
We kicked 12 straight against the Lions, which was really the reason we won, I think. And he was asked, "Who's your kicking coach?" And it's Chaplin. And he was asked, why then? He was asked exactly that question, Andy. Why do you think the improvement? Partially it is because of the ball movement and we're getting some of those free thingos. But like on the weekend, like I'll talk about, as I've talked about a number of times this season, we are a longer kicking side now than we have been since 21, 22. And I've got some data to back that up. So we are kicking to contest still in the forward line. But we're kicking often to that hotspot. So if you think about that Latrell kick inside to JVR, there were a number on the weekend where that's clearly a strategy where they're kicking to a designated spot on the ground, which is about 30 metres out directly in front. and obviously you're going to kick those goals. But the expected score takes them into consideration. If you're kicking a goal from, the expected score from a kick with no pressure from the goal score is 6. If you miss that, it's negative then 6. So that's the whole point about the expected score. It takes into account when and where the pressure.
The other thing is we don't have Petrarca, Oliver, and Viney kicking for goals.
Exactly. 100%. That's absolutely a huge factor. And we've got JVR, who's kicking goals. He's a very good kick. And Majacek, who's technically a very good kick. And Chandler, who's technically a very good kick. And Sharp, who's averaging over a goal a game, and he's an excellent kick for goal. So I think, George, that's more the point, is our personnel. We don't have Track bloody spraying goals from...
Talking about Track, there was an article during the week about that he's, over the off-season, he's had a consultant. Well, he wasn't being the consultant, and about his goal kicking, and he's had someone look at it because he's doing a lot better this year. So I'm just wondering why we didn't bring in a consultant to consult the consultant about his kicking earlier. But anyway, he's not our problem.
Yeah, I had to laugh about that because it did occur to me that if all he needed to do was to listen to the Demonland podcast, and George and I have been talking for about 5 years that he's got a technical flaw with the way he drops the ball, and that's what's changed, the way he's dropped the ball. It's like, so, sliding doors. I tell you what, if he'd just listened to us, maybe we win a second flag. Goody's still coach. It's he's also a double Rob Smith medalist.
Just having a look at the coaches' votes ladder. Let's just take a sidestep for a second, then I'll let you go on. Big man, if you have a look at the leaderboard of the coaches' votes, there's a lot of demons / ex-demons in that top, whatever it is, top 15. You got Max Gawn, you got Kozzy Pickett, you've got Luke Jackson, Christian Petrarca, Clayton Oliver, and Brodie Grundy. It's Demon Central in there. What could have been, but anyway. It was
going to be a bit Demon Central on Sunday with Goody coaching on the boundary line. They won't know which bench to run to, some of the players. Just finishing up a couple of bits of data that, we're nearly we're a quarter away into the season, a bit over. So it's a good time now to start looking at some of our trends. I mean, we're 4th on the ladder. A lot of data to say, historical data to suggest teams that are in the top 8 now at this point of the season historically finish in the top 8. It's a pretty clear historical pattern over, quite a long time, at least 25 years. So that all goes well that we're 4th, that's for sure. Just in terms of some of the stuff around our game plan, we're number 1 from scores from, this is from First Crack last night, so I'll credit where it comes from. Number 1 for scores from long down the line plays. We're also number 1 from scores from retention of long down the line plays. So we are kicking to a contest a lot, and we're choosing to do that. It's part of our model. And so, which is, I find ironic given the criticism of Goody. That's probably what was on my mind in terms of, we're long down the line, boring. As I mentioned a number of times this year already, we are playing long down the line. And on the weekend, it was really, really evident how we're doing. We're obviously kicking to a contest and super confident we'll win that. And when you look at it, if you look how JVR goes into contests, he goes in with flat hands. They're looking to obviously hit it to the front. It's a set play, and they showed one. So it's well worth having a look at First Crack. They show the one where Sharp gets out the back of that contest and sets up a goal. He argued, his point was, Montaigne was making this point, saying that it's part of our strategy to create the overlap run from that contest. That's where you get the opposition defences out of whack. So I thought that was interesting. Just in terms of some other data I saw during the week that it was interesting, just our these sort of stars of the new look demons. It was entitled, I forget which show it was on. Maxi Gawn, just in player ratings this year, these are our top-rated players. Maxi Gawn's number 1. He's 34 and he's averaging 18.4 player rating points a game. Kozzy's number 2. He's 24, 17.9. Jack Steele's 30. He's 3rd with 14.8 player rating points. Chin is 26, 14.3 is his rating points. Fritter is 5th. He's 29. His average rating points 13. Harry Sharp is 23. His average player rating points is 11.6 this season. Tommy Sparrow, he's 25, 11.5 player rating points. And the top, 1, 2, 3, 10 is rounded out by Harvey Langford. He's averaging 10.1, which is phenomenal for a second-year player, well ahead of the player he's often been compared to by myself and others, Ollie Dempsey, who's about 8.5 at the moment. And he's 20, obviously, Harvey Langford. The point of that data that was put up was how well balanced we are. I think it was on AFL, how well balanced our list demographic is. And in fact, compared to like Richmond, the point was it really was they're not in rebuild. I think it was on the roundup on AFL.com. Sam Mitchell was Sam Mitchell. Mitchell who won the Brownlow? He was making that point how well balanced our list is. So yeah, interesting game.
Tom.
I'll unpack further from a statistical perspective on Friday. A lot to like, but if you look at the numbers, just be mindful of the fact that the last quarter numbers blow out everything basically and skew the sort of whole match in terms of from a statistical perspective.
It was interesting watching. I was high up in the stands in the MCC as well. It was interesting watching the way Richmond set up, even early in the game. It was about the 10-minute mark, about 10 minutes before the end of each quarter. It was obvious they were running out of steam. And I thought, this is going to finish up being very ugly for them. They were just giving us far too much space in which to operate. I can't recall who did it. I tend to think it was Langdon. Had the ball in the goal square, the defensive goal square, and managed to take the ball to the 50-metre line, and no Richmond player came near him.
Yeah, if you're running along the Shane Warne wing back.
Yeah, if you give him that much space, but that was typical of the rest of the team. But in each quarter, it was the same. We scored our goals in the last 10 minutes because they just ran out of steam, and the last quarter was just the icing on the cake for us. It was always going to happen.
Yeah, that's what and that was basically what you just said was how I sort of summed up. It was in my preview. I said it's a similar thing to how Freo were cutting us up in those two games last year with I predicted we'd get up to 70, 80 points on turnover. We smashed them in the differential on turnover, but we didn't get to, I think we got 60, which is still pretty good, 59 perhaps. But they only got 24 or something on turnover. And, when we played Freo last year, you could see exactly that dynamic. And that's how I thought the game would play out. We would look to exploit their lack of run and their legs. And we weren't able to do so fully until, exactly as you point out, the last 4 or 5 minutes of each quarter and all of the final quarter. And as I say, I thought the Tigers played, pretty well actually in a lot of ways. It was interesting, and I'll be interested in your take on Heath because we weren't dominant in the ruck, but he had a great game actually in terms of that stuff. So yeah, definitely they were running out of legs, no question.
We'll get to Heath in a second because we've got a question about that. So let's get stuck into it. Master Chief writes, how good was Kozzy Pickett on ANZAC Eve? What stands out just as much as the performance itself is the journey that's led him here. He came into the league as a dangerous small forward, living off moments, pressure and scoreboard impact. Then we started to see those short bursts through the midfield, often at the start of quarters, where his pace and creativity could change the tone of the game in an instant. Last season, that role expanded. He wasn't just a cameo anymore. He was spending genuine time around the ball and learning how to influence stoppages, link up in transition and still hit the scoreboard. Now it feels like that progression is complete. He's not a forward rotating through the midfield. He's a full-time midfield who can go forward and do serious damage. And what's changed is not just where he plays, but how consistently he impacts. He's driving clearance work, and he still has that rare ability to turn a game in a matter of seconds. The flair is still there, but it's now backed by volume and authority, and he finally pulled off a Mark of the Year contender. He has absolutely justified every cent and every year of that contract. Players with his combination of explosiveness and game-breaking ability are rare, and right now he's delivering week after week. So the question becomes, have we already seen the best of Kozzy, or is there still another level to come? And where does he now rank among the elite players in the competition? Because on current form, he's pushing himself firmly into that conversation. So, George, where do you see Kozzy sitting in the competition right now? And is there still another level yet to come?
I think in years to come, we're going to look back on being around watching Kozzy in action. In terms of overall player input, he is absolutely in the top echelon. People talk about Robert Flower, and I only saw him for a short period, but he was exquisite with his skills. But I think Kozzy's got so much more in his arsenal than, and while it was a different style of play in those days, but the things that Kozzy does on a weekly basis in any game is just extraordinary. So it's easy to forget also this was off a fight for him to put in a performance like that off a 5-day break, and he went to Darwin during that 5-day break and back. We complain about having to go to Alice Springs and Darwin, but Kozzy's managed to do it and come out with the best on-ground performance like he did. It was just extraordinary. We've talked about the comparisons with Cyril Rioli in the past. He has absolutely left Cyril in his dust with what he's able to do. Cyril only played occasionally in the middle and most of the time in the forward line. Kozzy plays all over the ground. He's defensive. He's in the middle. He's taking centre bounces. Not that there's bounces anymore, but centre square ball ups. He's in the forward line kicking goals. Every time he gets the ball, you know something's going to happen. As I mentioned, I watched the game from high up in the members, and it was just extraordinary to watch him in action. You could see these chess pieces working around the ground, and time again, you thought, there is no way, absolutely no way he can get out of this situation, and yet everybody seemed to stand still while he danced around them in circles, left, right, straight through the middle. He was just doing exactly what he wants. It was just amazing to watch. He is as good as any player in the competition. And I think for all the Collingwood supporters, the difference is that Kozzy gets his own ball, unlike Dacos. So I think we've got one of the best players that we will ever see at the Melbourne Football Club, playing right in front of us at this very moment.
Shots fired on Nick Dacos, collateral damage in that film.
I could not agree more with all of what George just said. Spot on, I think. One of the things that, and I think you're right, George, to frame it in a historical sense, because what he's doing is, he's up there with one of the best players I've seen, I think. Of course, this year's a bit different in terms of, where does he rank with other players? This thing, I think, the two best players in the AFL are Bont and Dacos. Another year of this level that Koz is doing, and he's right up there. I really feel really strongly about that. I like all three of us. Well, I've watched footy. I've watched the D's for a long time, 50 plus years. I've watched the D's. I reckon I saw my first game. I reckon 50 years. So leaving Robbie aside, for me, he stands alone. Like, there's no other comparison for me, but that's probably my confirmation bias. The most consistently skillful and dynamic player I've seen at the D's was Jeff Farmer, the Wiz. They were always thought, pre his knee injury, Shorter he played some of the very, very best games by a D that I've seen. He could do it all. And I really love watching Jeff Farmer play. It's so much X factor, but it wasn't just that. He just always worked so hard. He was hard at it physically. He did it over how long was Wiz with us? 4 or 5 years? 5 years?
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. So over that time he was with us, and when he went to Freo, he was consistently excellent always. Like, it wasn't sort of like a ex-player who would play poorly for 1 week and, or 2 weeks and then turn it on. He was consistent across every game. But, as good as the Wiz was, Koz is on another level to him. And this sounds over the top potentially, but in the 50 years I've watched footy, the only players for me that have that combination of X factor, like just something about him, his ability to do incredible things, that his vision, his ability to see the game and around him. And I think, George, you pointed this out one time, is that his ability to make the decision what he's going to do next, you can always see it watching, that he's already made it before the ball's got it in his hand, and it just gives him so much I guess it's a bit of a myth or whatever, but it's like he's got that extra time. No one else can, few players I've seen can match his kicking skills, like I mentioned before, his ability to win his own footy and use the ball on an elite level. Maybe Cyril Rioli was up there. His goal sense, that sort of aggression he's got, his dynamic aggression. It's almost like he's always got something, physically he's really hard at it. And that sort of vibe that you just can't take your eyes off him. Just watching him, he's just amazing to watch. And the players, for me, the only ones who come close or who are in the conversation for me are Lee Matthews, Maurice Rioli, Cyril Rioli, Gary Ablett Sr., Michael Voss, and maybe at the very best, Track and Ackermanis. All, interestingly, all players who are equally damaging as mids and forwards, and that's a really rare combination. You don't actually get that many players who legitimately are elite at being a midfielder and also up forward. And all of those players could really hurt their opponents physically in terms of their want for contact and I guess their ferocity at the ball. And maybe I'm missing one or two, but that's the sort of company I feel like he's in at the level he's playing this year in particular. And just, the same thing. I think he's almost on the level to almost every other player at the moment, except for probably Bont and Dacos. But even them, neither of them quite have that same combination of attributes. It's and if Koz plays to this level for 2-3 more seasons, then he's going to be right up there as one of the very best footballers who's ever played footy, I reckon. Big call, I know, but I mean, what he's put on this season is unbelievable.
Yeah, I'd love to get an up-to-date comparison of Cyril Rioli and Kozzy Pickett, because I know a number of years ago someone on Demonland had done the comparison up until that time, and I can't remember when it was.
So would George, I think, a couple of times. I reckon he would have blown past him now.
I think he was with him, if not a little bit even ahead, even early in Kozzy's career, when you compare where they were at the same time in their career. We all know Rioli finished as a 4-time premiership player and a Norm Smith medalist for one of those, 3-time All-Australian. But I don't know, because he's going to, besides those particular stats at the moment, I think Kozzy's still ahead of him. And I'll love it if someone could do that comparison, and maybe I'll see if ChatGPT can pull anything out, but you can't always trust that.
No, I've refused to use it for the stats files because I've tried. I did some experimenting.
It lies to you sometimes, and it's wrong, and sometimes will lie to you and tell you it's right, and then just agree with you when you tell it's wrong. And anyway. Mandalorian asks, has Tom Sparrow finally taken the step up and blossomed into the player we hoped he would become after the flag? It's a big man, he's young Swallow, as you used to refer to him. Now that bona fide midfielder we were waiting for, and how does he fit into this new look midfield group?
I think the answer is yes in the short version. He fits in on a number of levels. One is I've loved his leadership. This year he's really grown into his leadership. He's always talked himself. In fact, I went with you to that event at Kooyong a few years ago, and he talked about, remember he was saying that was his goal to be a leader. That's what he wanted to do, and he's really developed that aspect of his on-field. I heard him interviewed the other day maybe it was after this game. He's just so mature. He's so he's great to listen to, super smart dude. The bottom line is he's playing great footy. He's a career player rating, which is one of the reasons I really like the player rating system, is because it gives you an ability to compare a player against their own performance, even if you don't think it's a great system. When it's pretty consistent tool to be able to compare a player with themselves, so to speak. His career average is 7.9 player rating points. Last year, he averaged 7.21 player rating points. In 24, 7.58. In the premiership year, 5.9 was his player rating. His up until this point, his highest rating season was 23 of 9.23. Which, by the way, puts, if you think that Langford is averaging, his player rating this year is 10.1. So it just shows how impressive Langford's been so far. This season, Sparrow's player rating point is 11.5. Is just it's gone. That's a significant increase just on output. One of the fascinating things about the Kings game plan is I talked early in the season that it would appear that he was going to run a lot of players through the midfield. Well, that's completely changed since, I forget which game it was the point in time it changed. I think it was at the Blues game. We only used 4 again this week, 5 last week, 4 the previous week. Sparrow's one of those players. So he's clearly waxing with steel. In some ways, it feels a little bit like he's been, he plays a little bit with steel of the Gus role of knowing when to go behind the ball and doing that. But I feel like King's freed him up as well. And I think those lower ratings in previous years is a little bit to do with the roles that Goody asked him to play, and he was disciplined enough to be able to play them, but probably the cost of his own performance, I think, in terms of his playing is a bit unnerving now. Of course, good on him that he's a free agent at the end of the year, and the conversation we had, I heard him answer that question. He said, "Well, I'm not going to pretty much talk about it anymore, but I'm holding off to the end of the year," which you never like to hear, but good on him too. From that,
then we really hope that he has a great year, because the better year he has, we make our compensation. Don't we get compensation? So, he's going to go.
Last year, his disposal efficiency was 67 is his disposal efficiency this year. He's been involved in his 300 metres gained this year. He was only 216 metres gained last year. Probably shows the difference in the role, but that's a lot. His career average for metres gains is 233. He's averaging 304. He's averaging 7.4 contested possessions a game. Last year it was 4.5. So he's, on all of the metrics you could run through, he's having a really breakout season. But the thing I'd emphasise the most is his leadership. That's the thing that's impressed me the most, and stood up in big games when we needed a senior player to stand up. He stood up.
What do you think? You mentioned King running less players through the middle. What do you think is what do you attribute that to? We've got like Rivers, Salem, all injured. Obviously, Viney hasn't been playing all year. Playing more guys as more wingmen. Langford, they're not really putting him into the middle. They're trying to use him as a pure wingman. What do you see that who are those players that were going in to the middle and that aren't going in?
He was rolling.
Currently playing now.
I talked about like a squad through.
Yeah. So who's currently in the team not injured that isn't getting those midfield minutes anymore?
Well, I don't think it's so much about that. I think that it's more about having, rather than using such a big number of players through, is having a smaller number, and maybe that's strategic to have them work better as a unit. It's a bit interesting because there's the focus on centre bounce attendances. That's not the only area where players win clearances and stoppages. Obviously, most of them are not in the centre clearances. Just on Sparrow, last year he was averaging only 1.9 centre bounce attendances a game. It's 18.7.
Yeah, but clearly the situation has changed with Petrarca and Oliver and Viney not being there. That had to change. That was always.
And I would argue, Claz is having a good season up at GWS, but he's been every inch as impressive, Sparrow. Back to you, in terms of your question, I think it's I'll talk about this a bit later in terms of our game plan. Yeah. I've come really around to thinking that King has allowed this idea of us being a run and gun team to flourish a little bit. But in fact, we've got a lot more strings to our bow strategically, and he does tactically. And there's been a bit of a conversation about this, and he started to talk about it a little bit. And that's one of them. I think the using 4 is part of his sort of horses for courses. I think each game, looking at statistically and tactically, each game looks a bit different. So there's a question about that, which I'll unpack a bit.
Yeah.
But getting back to Swallow, he's been just fantastic this season.
Didn't take long, Swallow.
Yeah, I led him down that way. I remembered as I was putting that question up that was your pet name for him. Haven't heard it for a while. Let's go on to the next one. Wiley D asks, I would love to know what the scores for and against were when Heath was rucking versus Gawn. Felt like the minute Gawn was in the ruck, we dominated. As an observation, it made me appreciate just how influential Gawn is around the ball with his ability to win contested possessions and not let his opponents hurt us. And Petal writes, keen to hear what the crew thought of Moose's game. Even though he only had 50% time on the ground and up against B-grade ruck opposition, I thought he held his own and created quite a few opportunities for our mids with his ability to get to the front of ruck contests and tap to advantage. I've also been impressed with his quick hands where he's able to find players in space and on the move. Would love to see him clunk a few, which looks to be another strength of his, but great signs early on. Max certainly had some confidence in him, stating post-game that because Moose was going well, he was able to rest forward in the last quarter. He also stated that he thought Moose had been BOG for Casey through their first few games so far, and was really pushing for selection. So it wasn't just to help Gorney out with loads. Moose has definitely earned his spot by the sounds of it. I think we've found one here. Balance with Tools moving forward will be the interesting watch. So, George, your thoughts on Heath's development as a second ruck option, and are you keen to see us use two genuine rucks going forward?
Very keen to see us using the two rucks. Just looking at the top 6 teams in the on the ladder at the moment, 5 of those, including us now, use 2 rucks during the game. There's probably only two other sides outside, St Kilda and Geelong, when they have a full list available, full ruckman available, who also use 2 ruckmen during the game. I think this is the trend. There was discussion about it, how coaches would accommodate the extra person on the bench before the season started. I think we now know the answer, and the successful teams are using it. There's a few other teams are going to find themselves like, Richmond's in this situation because of the injuries to Nankervis, but there's a few other teams that are going to be in a desperate situation because they don't have 2 genuine rucks able to play on the ground at the same time. But we do. We've got a 24-year-old Max Heath who acquitted himself very well in this game. And once again, I think in this game you saw the exact reasons why we need 2 ruckmen on the ground. Max certainly wasn't in his best form or whatever in the first quarter. Samson Ryan was matching him for that first 10, 15 minutes quite successfully. But then because the young kids had to come up against Max all the time, he had nothing left in the tank at the end of the quarters and ultimately in the last quarter as well. So that was the first reason. The second reason was Max got an absolute knee in the back courtesy of Bolter early on in the game, and he really struggled after that around the ground. So there's your second reasons. If Max gets injured, we would have been in real strife. Fortunately, we're against the side that didn't have a second ruck and against the side that was relatively inexperienced. We still have a long way to go since this was the first game that we used a second ruck. I'm not sure that they have quite worked out what's the best way to use the second ruck. When Max was sitting in the forward line, it was almost wasted in a sense. So I'm not quite sure how we can get both players on the ground. Maybe leave Max to do the centre bounce rucking, and then use Max Heath around the ground a lot more. I'm not quite sure how to use it, but it certainly felt like to me that sitting Max in the goal square did absolutely nothing because the ball didn't come down there as much as what was needed. So we've got Max Heath is 24. He's at that absolute prime time in a ruckman's life. It appears that they've got to have a few years under their belt before they actually hit their straps, and he's in the right spot. He's got a good protege in Max Gawn to look up to, but I think what we'll see if we keep using him on a more regular basis, he will get the confidence. When we spoke to him before the season, he was a little bit unsure about his role, where he would sit, because Max Gawn is such a great player to be rucking alongside. But I think a few more games under his belt, he will get the confidence to really start exerting himself. He's a very good ruck, certainly given the current rules. He's got a good height and he's got a good spring, which seems to be the way that most of the successful rucks are heading these days with the centre bounce change. So really pleased that we've got him. I hope we use him a lot more, and I think we'll see a lot more of him in the remaining games of the season.
Well, you've proven to be correct on that front. I didn't think we'd see him to the back half of the season, as I said on the podcast. I still don't think he'll play every week. I think it'll be horses for courses. There goes my dog, of course. But I did watch the game and I thought of you, George, thinking exactly what you just said. This is when you need your second ruck, when your main number one goes off injured. And geez, he looked just, more annoyed than anything, but he clearly was hampered, wasn't he, Maxie? He looked in a.
It was a knee straight to the kidneys. He was on his knees on the ground for a long time. Thanks, Mr. Bolter.
I actually thought it was interesting, George, because they Bolter rucked from the very first bounce, and they were asked actually later about why didn't you keep Bolter on him, because but Uze, knowing Max, having coached him for a long time, the teams that have really done something about Max are the ones who have physically gone after him, and I suspect that's what the plan was with Bolter is, do what you can to physically slow Max down, and that's what they did. But I was thinking about you in terms of Heath playing. I agree. He looks very athletic, and more athletic than I thought. He's got a very sort of smooth running action. So, and he's got a great leap. On the Stats File 26 thread on Demonland, there was a conversation about his game. Jay Rogan noted, reading this from Demonland, Heath had 50% game time for 13 hit-outs to advantage. His taps to first possession is 70%, which is basically off the charts. Okay, he was playing on the spud of spuds, but his output was in line with what a top six ruckman should do. I think it's a huge result, and next week will be a great watch against Grundy, which is a good point. And Wheelo responded to that. Yep, of the 54 games this season that a player has had 25 hit-outs, that was the third highest hit-out to first possession conversion, 69.2%, and the fourth highest hit-out to clearance conversion, 53.8%. So they're impressive numbers for a young fella. That's only his sixth game of AFL
and you can bet King, having been a ruck, would know those stats and be well aware of it, and
totally
work out how we can utilise that to our advantage going forward.
As I responded to that, though, it's actually worth noting. So all of that's true, and if you look at his hit out to advantage, he was hitting them really well, but it didn't translate into dominance on either the raw clearance numbers or scores from stoppage. Interestingly,
still early days. The players will all work out how they've been used to having Max, and maybe they'll learn sort of.
I actually think the biggest issue is what George pointed to is not what you do with Heath. It's what do you do with Max when Heath is rucking, because he doesn't look a forward, and you need the players who can get up and down there. I mean, I guess he can too. Having said that, it was a nice goal that he kicked in the end. He was pleased with himself afterwards. He kicked 1-3 as a forward, so I guess he'd say, well, 4 scoring shots is more than a lot of Demon forwards got last year.
Well, they were talking to Goody, basically talking about him and Brodie Grundy, but their relationship now. And he said, they've patched up whatever disagreements they had. And he realised that Brodie's not a forward and neither is Max. He made mention of that. All right, let's move on. I think Bailey Laurie showed a bit in the Sam 6172 says, I think Bailey Laurie showed a bit in this game, 62% time on ground, 17 disposals, a goal, and 11.4 play rating. His first quarter was slow. He was in the negative. And to be honest, I was ready to give up on him at AFL level. He built into it over the next 3 quarters, and while he isn't flashy, he made some good decisions and some good kicks. Was this a flash in the pan, or do you think he's slowly building to the level? He has long been a bit of a whipping boy on Demonland, and not without reason. Also, traditionally gives way out of the team as soon as we get men back from injury. I think he'd be hard done by based on this game if he was dropped. So, Big Man, what did you make of Laurie? Is this the start of something, or have we just been here before and he's just going to come in and out as players come back in and out of the team?
Oh, I think Sam 6172's pretty much nailed my thoughts on it, particularly in the build into it over the first 3 quarters. there's a real tension, isn't there, between how many opportunities to give a player, and if they don't perform and take their chances. I've felt Bailey Laurie's been in one of those situations where every time he's come into the team in the last 2 or 3 years, it feels like he's playing for his career. I really, really like the fact that they selected him this week after a pretty quiet game last week. I wouldn't be shouting from the rooftops about this game either, to be honest. I think, Sam 6172 nails it, is that he built into the game over the 3 quarters, and he seemed to, once he got his rhythm a little bit, started to make some really good decisions, including the setup goal that he set up for Windsor. Smart bit of play. He was an inside mid as a junior, I think, wasn't he, George? I think that was his junior profile.
Yeah, and most of all of his time down at Casey's been in the mid.
Yeah, so I think that's his go. That high half forward role that Goody had him playing doesn't suit him. He's got to be in and under. You've got to be using his ability to hit those 20, 30-metre targets. He is an excellent kick. His tank looks like it's improved, and I think that's the critical thing for anyone playing his role in modern footy, but in particular the way King's got. He wants his team playing, which is all about ability to run out games, all about cover ground and continue to do the kilometres that he needs his players to do. And I think a big part of the answer to that question will be, if Laurie has genuinely got AFL elite sort of aerobic capacity and running power, then I think that he definitely can make it. I really hope that he gets selected again this week, but there's a bit of I think selection pressure this week. It's going to be interesting. There's a bit about this in holding shares. I'm holding shares on Laurie.
Yeah, we'll get into the holding shares. I've got some thoughts on him as well, so we can probably talk about that then. Let's get into the next one. How nice was it to be on the positive side of the free kick ledger? Listening to the Pearl Clutchers on the commentary team, you would think that we had committed a capital crime, and I thought the media had a directive not to acknowledge the umpiring. Dunstall nearly had a fit. You love to see it. A long may it rain free kicks. Not sure if I said that was from Radelaide. Nothing gives me more pleasure than hearing and reading all the carry-on in the media and on social media about how hard done by the poor young Tigers were by the umpires. All I can say is boo effing who. How many times have I jumped on here ranting and raving about how we were shafted by the umpires, and not just because we were on the wrong side of the free kick count, because it's always the bloody frees that you don't get that kill you. And the funny thing is that when that happened, nobody ever wiped away my tears, and the media never ever said boo about that, let alone climb up on their soapboxes to champion our cause when we were getting shafted by the blind maggots. And looking at you, Caroline Wilson, who had a Richmond hat firmly on when she was complaining about the umpires the other night. And now suddenly there's full-blown crusade to defend the honour of the poor baby Tigers, as if a couple more free kicks would have changed anything and stopped them getting belted by 10 goals. And I nearly fell out of my chair when I found out what the actual free kick count differential was, and we had a staggering 9 more free kicks than them. But again, it's the ones you don't get, right? Cry me an effing river, Sir George, were the Tigers shafted by the umpires, and do we care?
Really couldn't care about Richmond's situation. I think the telling thing is there were some absolutely appalling decisions made in this game. They were absolute shockers. We were fortunately the beneficiaries of most of them. There was one particular umpire who the people I go to the football with groan whenever they're selected as an umpire, because all they ever call is play on, play on, play on. People can be jumped on, have their necks taken off, and it's always play on. So our listeners can work out who that is. The two ones that really stood out for me was Cully, who managed to avoid, I think it was 3 successive tackles without holding the ball being called, and eventually got it around the neck, I think, and it was called a free kick to him. But Bailey Laurie kicked the goal from advantage. But yeah, three opportunities to get rid of the ball, and there was no holding the ball. But the other really, really telling one, which I think is going to be questioned across the whole league time and time again, was the 50 metres that was given to Myercheck for a player who was supposedly in the zone, despite the fact that they were running past and absolutely parallel to him at the time, and a good 5 metres away, who was told to stand. Firstly, he's not standing anywhere. He's not anywhere near the mark where he's got to go. But because he was running past and running into the forward line, they paid 50 metres. Well, great. We got that. That was a bonus to us, but it wasn't in any of the rules, and I don't know what the umpire thought they were looking at. But of course, the Richmond fans would, if it had happened to us, we would have had exactly the same response as what the Richmond fans had. It was just poor umpiring, as simple as that.
I thought the umpiring was excellent.
But that's the thing. How many times have we had bad? I know there was some howlers, but we've had howlers against us. Like, they made out as if that was the whole reason Richmond lost, and it was bad, but it wasn't any worse than we've had before. And yeah, the AFL might be going through a bit of a bad patch, but that's what happens when you create all these new rules. Anyway, sorry, big man.
Well, just on that, as I said, around this time every year, although normally a bit later in the year when it's wet and boring and the footy slows down, I'm convinced that, like 3 years ago it was a joke, conspiracy theory. It's less and less a joke. I'm convinced the AFL deliberately make this rubbish up with the stand rule, and then they'll react. And the holding the ball rule was the one at the moment, and then they'll react, because it's just a content creation exercise. I'm absolutely convinced. I know it sounds ridiculous.
They're copping a lot of criticism at the moment, the AFL.
But they're engineering it.
They've got a lot of heat on them that the game's in disarray.
Who cares? It's filling up the bloody 360 with its stupid bloody slow-mo videos. We're talking about it. It's all over social media. Their strategy for 15, 20 years has been saturate the market, dominate the media market. It's a Trumpian flood the zone
strategy. Any publicity is good publicity.
Exactly. Every year, like clockwork, there is a concocted, absolutely AFL-driven controversy around the umpiring every single year. At the moment, it's holding the ball. What is holding the ball? What's the stand rule? They bring in a rule and then the
dissent,
it starts off one way.
Remember dissent?
Just dissent. When I saw a player on the weekend, a Brisbane Lion player. They mentioned it on the coverage. He was going off at the umpire, pointing at the scoreboard.
Nah, none of that anymore. There's no more dissent.
And that was a big controversy. Yeah. Every single year, without fail, there is an umpiring quote unquote controversy, and they're always AFL created. And I think they're happy for all the noise about it. I think it's part of their dog and whistle program. I just think that it's like clockwork. Every single year, there's something, and I'm increasingly positive it's a deliberate strategy by the AFL.
Yeah, this week it's the ARC. Last week it was the Appeals Tribunal, and all of those things.
Well, I'm less convinced the Appeals Tribunal is deliberate. That is just mismanagement. But,
that was the point I'm making. The ARC is the same. It's mismanagement.
That was terrible.
No, that's deliberate because come on, the ARC. They don't have the technology to do it. And
that was
on the ARC.
Yeah.
Speaking of technology. Now, don't get me wound up. Speaking of technology, where's the Wonder Football with the sensors?
Yeah, well, what happened to
that?
Let's
talk about that for 12 months.
Weren't they trialling that in the VFL? And what's happened?
And in the women's footy,
it's being trialled it's being used in the women's this season. Yeah. But the question is, why? Why not use it now?
No, because the technology doesn't work. It's the same with the ARC. What's the point of having review if your technology is not up to it? It's the same in the cricket. They do it because it's. Oh, God knows, who knows why they do it. It's because it annoys people and it creates content.
But what happened with that ARC decision? Why wasn't that just at the time said, no, we're having a look at this, bring it back, well before the 90 seconds or whatever?
The problem is that the goal umpire was quite correctly called it a point because the ball was over the line. There was no doubt about that.
Wow.
And because he called a point, there was no question sent up to the ARC, but the ARC decided for whatever reason they're going to start reviewing points now.
But why didn't they, when they started reviewing, say you got to stop because we're reviewing this? That's the question, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah,
because
but
that's not what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to do it in, for me, the 90 seconds is furphy. That's not the issue. The issue is, why did they choose that one to do, and they'll let other one go? Like there was one where Harry Sharp, it clearly was given out on the full, and it was no way it was off Harry Sharp. They didn't call that. The guy had a shot at goal subsequent to that. So, like, why did they choose that particular one to call it back when there's probably 20 a game that you could send up for review if they're going to start doing boundary line? It's just ridiculous. Again, I would argue that this is the AFL trying to manipulate media and content.
Yeah.
I would always favour incompetence over conspiracy.
Well, yeah, I would
think it's
2 or 3 years
incompetence, I
ago,
agree.
except for every year, like clockwork, it happens around about the same time at some point, Occam Razor kicks in and go, well, there's something else at play here.
Incompetence.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Rue Beauty says, is it time to put Trelly back in the twos? He's been quiet for a couple of games now, and his kicking really needs some attention. So, B-Man, your thoughts on Trelly in the past few weeks? Do we persist, or does he need a spell in the twos to recapture that magic that we saw in the pre-season?
Well, not just in the pre-season.
Yeah,
true. Just because you've missed most of the season on your overseas jaunts.
I did say.
He
certainly hasn't been... He hasn't been at that level that we saw earlier in the year, in the last couple.
No, well, look, I wouldn't frame it like sort of recapture the magic. I don't know what. I was just
adding some flair to the question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would think that it depends where they see his development at, and if it's good for his development to go back and spend some time in the VFL to work on specific things, which is, for instance, his kicking, his Rue Beauty notes. Then I could see the logic. I think part of it is, we talked about this with Koz, our number one Koz, on the podcast, when you were banging on all the time about how few kicks and goals he gets. And I was banging on about, it's not about that. It's about his running power.
I actually said that. It was probably about your mate Nibbler that I was used to bang on about.
No, you're banging on about it all the time.
Kozzy,
small forward, what's their point if they're not kicking goals?
I don't think I agree that I do say that, but I don't think I ever said that about Kozzy.
Oh, you said it like every week, and every week I said
Kozzy.
A version of about Kozzy.
I said that about every single. Well, I'm not going to go back because really I don't.
I'll go back and find it and get you to clip them up.
Yeah, well, I'll do that. If you find it, I don't think I said about Kozzy. I would have said about every other small
often
forward.
You said it about Kozzy. What's the point of small forward if they're not kicking goals?
Not Kozzy though. That Kozzy I think is different. I've never said that about Kozzy. Every other small forward, yes.
Okay. You're wrong, but in any case, the same applies to Trell, because what I said a few years ago about Koz is because you don't know what he's being asked to do, and as a pressure forward and someone critical defensive running and offensive running, for me it would be a bit trying to understand what his role and what he plays with that. But two is I look at the tracking data on the Telstra tracking data each week, and in most weeks he's up in our most running in terms of key running stats. So this week, work rate in defence is when the opponent has the ball. So an average speed when the opponent has the ball, you can really get a sense of when one team is up and running over the ground and one team isn't. By this particular one. So the 5 players' average speed and attack were all Tigers, which means they're all running ahead of the ball. But this one's the more important one. The average speed and defence, the top 5 players were all Demon players. Laurie, who we talked about before, he averaged 9.1 kilometres when the Tigers had the ball. Sparrow, Windsor, Giath and Colt rounded out the top 5. That's a really important stat because that's the running power when, in this case, the Tigers have the footy, and that's how you stop them moving the ball, is by covering ground and making it difficult for them to transition. Trell has been in that top 5 most weeks and isn't this week. So for me, if he goes back, would be a little bit less about recapturing his magic, so to speak, more about maybe giving him a chop out. It's his first year of AFL footy. He's only done one AFL pre-season. A bit about if he's going to be able to contribute to the running power of the team. But when he's on, he's amazing to watch. So I'd be loath to see him out of the side can't see it happening, to be honest. But
too easy to forget that he is a first-year player 6 games into it. We have high expectations, but Kozzy in his first year, you could see the talent, you could see what was there, and again, we had expectations above what a first-year player can probably do, and Trell's in the same situation. So, yeah, he'll be right. The other problem is, who in the hell do you bring in from Casey instead of him?
Well,
really?
We've got a few options this week, George. I mean, who the hell? What about Paddy Cross, who got selected off one game in VFL and played fantastic? He's every chance of coming in. And Andy Manise Wakefield got 30-plus possessions. He's every chance of coming in. I mean,
they're not even close to Latrell.
Well, depends. But it's not like you would swap. It's not one player out, the exact same type of player in. So, you only need to cover off player in. So we've got options to bring in. So, but I can't, having said that, I can't see him being dropped.
Monocular writes, how well is our new midfield of Steele, Kozzy, Sparrow and Windsor performing? Could anyone expect that the loss of 3 premiership mids, Jack Viney, Christian Petrarca and Clayton Oliver over one off-season be covered so well? The loss of Cully will hurt, though, as he was a big-bodied slot-in role player. If any of the above aren't available, who would be the next fill-ins? Langford, Langdon, Sharp, Rivers, Bowie, Laurie, Cross, Henderson. So, George, our midfield is exceeding expectations, not just amongst our own supporters, but across the wider footy world. The loss of Cully is absolutely devastating. You've got to feel for the kid, given the journey that he's taken to get on an AFL list, then the ACL at the Eagles, a lifeline from the Ds, the broken arm in the preseason, and now the second ACL. It really is heartbreaking. So the question is, who steps up to fill that role?
I don't think we've got anybody to replace Cully as such for what Cully was doing and where he was playing. He's a surprisingly big player, still finding his way, but I just can't see anybody at Casey, Cross, Henderson, those sort of players. They're just not up to the same class or the same level. They may well come in because there is no one else. I've been talking about this. We don't have a lot of depth in this at Casey of quality players who are going to take that next step. So when you start losing people like Cully, who've done a fantastic job to get where they are, this is what will really hurt us. So unfortunately, I really can't see anybody.
Just on RJ's point, it's probably is in terms of our centre square set up in our midfield. We were in fact actually not going so great on clearances. We're down. So in terms of differential, Brisbane, unsurprisingly, stoppage clearances, for instance, are averaging 8.4 more stoppage clearances than their opponents on top of that table by heaps. We're down at 15th for we're losing on average stoppage clearances around the ground clearances. We're differential averaging minus 2.7 per game. So it is an area of weakness for us. Having said that, the way footy's being played is the scores from stoppages is at a historic low in terms of it being a potential score source, but it's still important, obviously. So centre clearances differential, the Bulldogs are actually number one, 3.6 more than their opponents. Brisbane number 2, 3.4 from centre clearances. We're not so bad on that, actually. We're fourth on the AFL ladder for centre clearances differential, which is pretty good. But, he's going to be hard to replace Cully. It's really heartbreaking, and I hate to see any player go out like that, and particularly a young fella who's already done one. It was his opposite one, wasn't it? So, it's really is heartbreaking, and he'll be definitely hard to cover. And the other thing that is hard to cover is that he was being used on the opposite wing to Langford, or chopping out Langford as the tall sort of winger style. So definitely will be. I actually thought that maybe an option is Rivers is a real mystery. I wondered whether he could play that tall winger role. Rivers is tall, he's big, he's strong, he's got a good leg on him. He's wanting to play midfield. He's a defender, so that role has to push back in defence. And it occurred to me that he might be the logical one to step up and fill that. I mean, premiership player who he's an excellent player, Rivers. So he might well be a player who could step into Cully's role, I reckon.
He's still a few weeks out, isn't he?
It's not really clear, to be honest.
Well,
we're playing Ducks and Drakes, I think, with our injuries this year. Yeah. No different from other years, but I think King is taking a leaf out of his mate's Brad Scott's book in terms of transparency with injuries.
Well, not just on that front. I tell you, he's really lent into the language of AFL is lying. He talked about in the lead up to the Tigers game. He all but said there were going to be multiple changes because of the 5-day break. There was a grand total of one change.
Yeah.
As it turned out, one Petty went out, Giath came in. That was it. There was one change, and as I said, in his Monday or Tuesday presser, he all but said that with the 5-day break, you're going to see a lot of changes. So, yeah. But Rivers is an interesting one. I mean, Rivers is a gun, and it's not clear what his injury is or why he's, how long he's going to be. But it seems to me that he's going to struggle to come. Where would you put him on the half-back flank? I don't think he's a mid. So, playing that Cully wing role, who can play mid when required, can push forward, can also push back. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Particularly when you've got AMW possibly pushing to come in. As a backman.
And Bowie coming in.
Bowie coming back as a backman. You've got, Xavier Taylor's probably going to be in and out as he develops this year, and he's a backman too. So.
And look, on the depth, we've had this discussion lots of times, and I just disagree. I think that depth is, as Hinkley, who I'm really enjoying, there's a few people on radio I'm really liking at the moment, and Hinkley's one of them. He said is basically what I believed last week on the radio. He said it's a myth. Depth's a myth. You take out your best 5-6 players of any club, you're not replacing them, full stop. So the only team that has got anywhere near what people would commonly think of as depth is Brisbane. He said every other team doesn't bat past 25, 26, and you take out your 4 or 5 best players, you're not covering them full stop is what is. And I agree with him, and I just think it's injury is the factor. It's not depth, it's injury. Every club's got no depth. If you talk to any fans about who's in your twos, they would say, "Oh, we haven't got that many," because there aren't that many AFL, level players. So his point, Hinkley's point, was goes to 30 and that's it. So 25 to 30, Brisbane are an outlier, but really depth is all about how many players you've got injured and who those players are. So
next thing we've got to talk about, Big Man, you had some list management and player stock take questions for us, and our very own Big Man asks, are you allowed to ask questions? I'm not sure. But anyway, can the panel do a quick review of their preseason selections for breakout players and players under the pump? And I wonder why you brought this up. I'm sure when we go through it, you're going to cover yourself in glory here somehow and say that Kozzy Pickett was always going to be a champion from his first year. So I'll go out. My breakout player was Jai Cully. He was my breakout. His preseason was outstanding despite the broken arm. He worked his way back and was playing some really strong roll footy on the wing and through the midfield. He showed how strong he was in the air and how valuable he can be around the contest. And as we just mentioned, the injury is devastating. We wish him a speedy recovery, and no doubt once he's right, next year he'll work his way back into the side. I've got no doubt about that. Now, George, when I checked the show notes, you had actually written down Tom Matthews, but in the episode, you actually spoke about Max Heath, who you originally had written down as a player under the pump. So Tom hasn't debuted yet, but you've likely seen him at Casey, so you can talk about one or both of them here as your players that you talked about.
Well, we've seen Max Heath now for one game, and I think we'll see a lot more of him as he develops and our needs.
Was it 2 games? Didn't he play 2?
Just one.
This one.
Yep.
Tom Matthews. Did he play? Oh, no, did he come in for Petty this week? Was that the change?
Yeah. Tom Matthews will be in the side at some stage. He's come off virtually a zero pre-season, so he's got to build up some tank. But what you see even in the 3 games at Casey here is absolutely relentless attack on the man and attack on the ball. So just give him a little bit longer till he can build up build up the endurance that's required for AFL. He kicked a couple of useful goals down at Casey this week, but wasn't seen for a lot of the game. But it's just a matter of time for Tom.
And he's also, when we talk about low possessions, but kicks goals. He always has 9 or 10 possessions, but will maybe bob up for 2 goals. That's what I like to say.
Yeah.
You're halving Max Cease experience. It was his second game. He played against the Lions.
Yeah, that's right. So who came out this week? It was
he had 16 fantasy points.
Yep.
Kicked the behind. Had 4 disposals. 2 kicks are pretty, maybe because he was only on the ground 27.
Yeah, he was 20. Yeah, that's right.
So you could blink and miss him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, big man, you threw up Blake Howes, and then you started talking about Xavier Lindsay. So Howes has clearly taken the next step. He's locked in a spot in the side, and Lindsay probably hasn't quite found his place. We've seen the glimpses. We know that he's very talented. And there was also news from Tom Morris that he's dealing with a groin injury and will miss another 1 to 2 weeks on top of what he's already missed, which is disappointing for him. So you want to have a talk about those 2 boys?
Well, yeah, I've summed it up, although Blake Howes has been, he's been a revelation, hasn't he? He's been so consistent down back. He plays tall, he plays small. I think I'm right in saying he was on Cameron at different stages in the game against Lions. He had a match-winning play, not giving away that free with going back with the flight of the ball. I forget the Lions player that he did, the one that Coltman cleaned up and kicked it across the Sparrow. That he uses the ball well, super fit, gets up and down the ground, really important part of the defensive system that they were trying to put in place there. Like I've said this a number of times, Xavier Lindsay is so underrated. He's been brilliant this season. He is going back to the halfback flank for sure. He might be someone who could push up to the wing and take Cully, although he's not that tall player.
Yeah.
He's future captain of the Melbourne Footy Club.
He was captain, wasn't he?
He was captain
wherever he was.
And for people talking about Xavier Lindsay, he's not a halfback flanker. It's a bit that rhymes with halfback flanker. He was in his first year of junior footy. That's where he played. He played arguably his best game of represent. He played at halfback flank, exactly in the role he's playing in the seniors this year so far, as the quarterback, halfback role who gets up and down the ground. For a second year player coming off his first full AFL pre-season, pity about his about his groin injury. Fantastic footballer who is, I'm super, super bullish on him. The focus has been on Langford, in terms of his draft class. But Xavier Lindsay is got leadership written all over him. I think he's been brilliant down back and will be back in the team as soon as he's fit and ready. Fantastic player, I reckon.
There's been 3 players who've really taken a major step up this year. One is Chandler. Yep. Another is Sparrow, and Howes is the third.
Yep.
4, you'd have to say Harry Sharp. He's been incredible.
Harry Sharp. We haven't talked much about him on the podcast. I don't know what you guys did the last few weeks, but something about what do you think it is?
As I said, he's our 5th, or whatever I said before, he's our 5th or 6th highest rated player.
Wasn't he last year was mostly that sub guy, the super sub, but now he's been, given license to, I don't know, he's a totally new player this year, I think. Do you think that was always there, or they were getting the most out of him, or what's the case?
Well, I think the talent was always there. You don't just suddenly become talented. I think, a few things. I think that the game plan suits him incredibly, particularly with Nibbler not there. Like you need now, the funny thing about where footy is now is Nibbler was exemplar of that high half forward you needed in every team to do that sort of running. Basically, under King's model, you need 18 nibblers, and Sharp is the nibblest of the nibbler. His running power is unbelievable, only matched by Langdon in our team. He's got probably, I know for a fact he's still got the best time ever for a 2-kilometre time trial in the draft combine. He's an elite runner. He's surprising. He's a brilliant shot for goal. He's got good goal sense. think that the game has come to him. King's game plan is suits him down to the ground, and there's a lot to be said for not being the sub all the bloody time.
Yeah.
So, he's starting games.
Yeah.
He's got a really good energy too.
Finishing the games as well. He's got that run.
Finishing the games, running them out.
Yeah.
Clearly a popular player. He strikes me as the sort of player that I really think one of the big things over the last 4 or 5 years that's undersold is the loss of Gus, that role of the glue player, someone who brings different people together. He strikes me like that. He looks like he's got a great relationship on field with his teammates. He's been a revelation this season. And as I said before, 3 weeks ago, he was the third most improved player in terms of the champion data player ratings in the AFL.
Yeah, really like him.
He's strong every week since. He's our 6th or 7th highest rated player for this season thus far. We're 5-2, so he's travelling pretty well.
I liked in the Brisbane game he was giving it to the Brisbane players the whole game.
Yeah. The only thing I'd say, he's got a terrible haircut, but
we can't all have great heads of hair like you, big man. All right. So we get in now, big man. Your question was about players under the pump, but in our pre-season preview, we framed it a bit more positively. So I'm surprised you went the negative with players under the pump. We said it was the players needing to take the next step. Which effectively is probably the same thing, but just said in a nicer way. So I had JVR in that category, and I think he's done exactly that. He started with 6 goals in round 1. He's kicked 10 goals, 8 so far this season. He's averaging 4.3 marks a game for 30 marks so far this season. And interestingly, last season, he had only taken 46 marks in total. So that's only if he takes 16 more marks, he's already beaten his 2025 tally, and he had an average last year of 2.8. So, he's getting higher up the ground. He's competing, and I guess having Myercheck alongside him really has helped. Plus, he's no longer having to pinch hit in the ruck as much as he did, and that's certainly freed him up, and he's well and truly on his way to have taken that next step that we wanted him to take at the start of the year. So, George, as we touched on earlier, you had Max Heath listed when we did the thing, but you actually spoke about Matt Jefferson as the player needing to take the next step, and he's had a couple of games now to show something. How have you assessed Jeffo over the past few weeks, and is he starting to move in the right direction to take that next step?
Still too early to say. I think from my perspective, he's taken a couple of good marks in the last couple of games. What still worries me about Jeffo is he doesn't quite know how to play as a forward, like Myercheck does. He just doesn't react fast enough. He depends on something happening up the field before he reacts. He doesn't create the option for the people up the field. Look, he's got a lot of work to do. He takes marks when he's got a free run at it. I don't think he's physically strong enough yet by any stretch. Still a lot of work to do. Let's hope that he shows something. We've got a lot invested in him for a high draft pick. We just got to wait and see.
And big man, you had Colton Tolstrup, and if he hasn't already taken the next step, he's very close. The move into the tagging roles plus time on the wing and the half back shows his versatility and growth. What's your read on Colt so far this season?
Well, I think under the pump he's really stepped up. Had a terrific season thus far. You nailed it. What's really interesting though is, again, I was wrong about him being half-back flank. I didn't see him.
He told us when we spoke to him, he wasn't talking half-back flank, so he pulled.
He was talking high half forward, wing utility role. Yeah. But he's been really impressive at playing in the back pocket or half-back flank, whatever role. He's been basically a defender for the last, hasn't really been tagging at all for the last 2-3 weeks, and he's taken the kick-outs, or he did in the absence of Lindsay, and he's got a thumping kick. Yeah, and kicked along to a contest. I love his contest. A bit about the same with Harry Sharp, your question about, well, what's the difference? there's no question in my mind when we spoke to him that, and I've heard this, you hear these things coming up all the time about the freedom and the initiative, and you're a high draft pick and show it. And I think that's the same with Sharp. And I was thinking about this. Remember I said early in the season, I feel like players have got a directive to, when you've got a chance to, if you're in sort of 30, 40, 50 metres of kicking goal, go for it yourself, don't pass it off. I was thinking about that on the weekend, and I was thinking actually probably got a wrong read on that. I reckon it's more about the sort of philosophy of, I trust you, we trust you, you're a high draft pick, you're here playing AFL, just go for it. And I think that's what's driving players having shots from 50 metres when maybe there's an option into the corridor, and I love it. Like, I just love to see it. And I think Sharp is a beneficiary of that. Sparrow's a beneficiary of it. But most of all, Colt is, you can see him growing into it week by week and feeling his oats in an old-fashioned phrase. And I'm really loving the energy he brings. And speaking of players every team needs, every team, every organisation, every group needs a player who's energetic and fun and bring something else to it, who might be annoying at given times
and a pest to the other teams. That it doesn't seem to phase him and take him off his game, but he's such a pest that I think it unnerves the opposition players and it takes them off their game because they want to give it to him. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't phase him for some reason. It doesn't put him off his game by doing that. But it's working against the opposition. I'd
say the opposite. He's like Ackermanis in that it makes him play better.
Oh, yeah, maybe it makes it. But,
same with Pat Lee,
but I'm saying the goal is to put the opposition as well off their game, and it works because they're trying to get into him all the time, and he doesn't care.
And I heard that Max say something about, like, as a tagger, he's into them verbally all the time.
Yeah, you can see one of the games. Who did he tag that week? Was it Sarong or someone like that? He was just every second he was just leaning into him and really giving it to it. Oh, right, they beat us by whatever. But I like that about it.
So he's best 22 lock, and I just want to say something about the one of the things that Goody didn't get credit for last year in the wash-up of being sacked was the time he put into both Xavier Lindsay and Colt. Colt played lots of games that he didn't deserve last year. We talked about it a lot on the, just on pure form. But you've got to get these young players to that critical 40, 50, 60 game mark. And the only way to do that is to play him. And he got gifted a lot of games where, there are other players in the Magoos that probably deserved a game ahead of him. And we're reaping the benefit of that now to an extent. So
you can see there was a funny positive and a negative, though, of Goodwin, the fact that he got the games into him. But
potentially, but the fact remains, same with Xavier Lindsay, that he was criticised, is that the only way to get to 50 games is to play him. So, Goody was coaching for his career. There was a funny story about Colt on Demonland. Ghost Rotor wrote from Demon Army that he was pumping, that said something or other about they were loud. Who was he tagging? He was playing on someone down, and they said with the dancing and the jigging and how loud and annoying it was, and that he turned to the cheer squad and asked them to pump it up a bit. So, it makes me. He is quite a likable character. So yeah, good to see him playing well.
As a big man, your other question was, are you buying, holding or selling shares? And you listed a couple of players, Jeffo, Laurie, Adams, XT, Cross, that's Xavier Taylor, Cross and Henderson. So let's go one by one. I'll start off. Jeffo, for me, it's a hold. I still see the potential. He's got a good set of hands, as George said. He can take a mark, but I do have some question marks over his goal kicking. He just needs to make the most of every opportunity he gets, and I'm not convinced that he's got the real mongrel in him to go to that next level. So for now, it's a hold, but I wouldn't hesitate to sell even at a loss if things don't start to shift. I'm happy to give him a chance, and he'll probably get that in the next few weeks, months. But he needs to show some more, and I think this is it. This is his opportunity. He's got to take it now, because if he goes back to the twos, that could be all over for him. While he's in the team, he's got to make the most of it. George, you've talked about Jeffo, but anything you're holding or selling?
I'm shorting Jeffo because I think you'll be able to buy him back at a later stage for a lower price.
That wasn't one of the bloody options.
That's good.
Tell you
I
what,
like
you
that.
put a finance person in, and they've got to make things difficult, don't you? Well, I don't know what shorting is, so I'll hold him.
You'll hold him. Okay. All right. Laurie, for me, hold with an option to buy. I wasn't a huge rap for Bill early on. He always looked like a really solid VFL player, and he does everything right at that level, but never quite translated it to AFL level. And to be fair, he never really got a proper run of it in the position that he was playing in the twos, and he was always just put into the forward line and then sort of came out of the team as quick as he came in. So he's been in 2 weeks in a row now. Let's see what happens. But yeah, hold for the moment. But it seems like we've got a lot of players like that. Yeah, so yeah, I'll hold him. George, Laurie.
Already sold.
Already sold. Right, he's gone. Right.
15 games in 5 years.
Yeah.
When you're a small player like he is, you've got to bring something special. I haven't seen anything special.
It's already sold. I'm holding with not much confidence, with limited confidence, but holding for the time being.
Yeah. All right. Adams, if not for Petty's injury and May's retirement, this would be a straightforward sell for me. To be fair, I haven't really seen a huge amount of him, but what I have seen hasn't really grabbed me. I'd still have Tom McDonald ahead of him at the moment, so he needs a big year in the twos. You think he's on the verge of getting an opportunity given the injury, so let's see what happens. George?
I'd be selling in this case. Simply hasn't shown enough in the years that he's been around, and the fact that we consider Tom McDonald to be a more valuable option at this stage tells you where he's at. Yeah. He's not really showing much at Casey. Even this week, it was the same story again.
I'm selling, but noting that, like another player down the list, he was an emergency on the weekend.
Oh, was he?
And
yeah,
well, often that's some sort of indication.
That was due to that was a numbers game, but.
Yeah. Well, unlikely. More I see that they use that more as a incentive, like a psychological incentive, exactly, to say you're not far away. That's my read. He wasn't likely to get picked, not with T-Mac in the wings. It was more so.
Who were the emergencies?
I'm selling, but noting that he was the emergency.
Who was
I think they named? I think it was Henderson as well.
Yeah, that was the other player. So Henderson is. So until I would have been selling both Adams and Henderson before they were made emergency against the Tigers. So
XT Xavier Taylor was the next one, and as NSYNC famously saying, "Bye bye bye," and that's BUY, not BYE. He's young, he's raw, but I love the way that he goes about it. I loved his enthusiasm in the preseason and the way he took the game on. He'll only improve with more exposure at AFL level this year. An absolute buy. I reckon we've got a really good one here. I'd say that he'll be in and out of the team probably. I'm not sure what'll happen, whether the coach will just back him in and play him, but we'll see. But yeah, he's definitely a long-term prospect and definitely buy. George?
Taking out call options on him.
What's a call? Come on.
You get an option to buy in the future, but no obligation. So, and they don't cost as much. So you're going to be able to pick up something that's very valuable in the future. In other words, he's got a lot of upside that we will see. He's definitely got everything that we need, particularly in defence.
Oh, hedging your bets. I'm buying. I'm definitely buying.
Hedging's different.
I'm buying, though I think he will get dropped this week, but I'm still buying because I love his attitude. I loved what happened on the weekend. Did you see the prank that the team played on him?
Well, I don't think they played a prank on him. I think he started walking into the rooms and they were and then they made fun of it. It was like, and I liked he was interviewed by Dermy, I think, the week before in his first week. He just sounds like he's got a good head on him,
Well, he's definitely got a head on him and a bit of a rough head, but
I don't know. I think he sounds like he's switched on. So
and he's super competitive. And last week, I'm confusing the two games because of the pretty sure it was last week in his first game. He just went in and took a huge hit in the air against. Definitely it was against the Lions. Just trying to remember who it was against, but it was a frightening hit where it was just courage from both. It didn't give away a free. And I thought in that instant, there's a player, he looks, to be honest, like he needs another full season at AFL conditioning and muscle, particularly for that role. But he loves to fly at the ball.
He'll get that, yeah. He'll get that.
He'll get that, and he's brave. He wants to take the game on. Yeah. He's the future. I'm definitely buying.
Yeah. None of this. He's a footballer's footballer.
He's a footballer's footballer. And for exactly the reason that, that George and me, for that matter, the query I have on Jeffo is that first, instinct isn't always necessarily to go for it. I think actually Jeffo's got better with that. That's not the case with XT. He just wants that ball. He reminds me of a young JVR in that sense, super competitive. And just speaking of JVR, by the way, he's got a habit that he needs to break, and it was really bad on the weekend of running underneath the ball. And
he's been doing it all year. I don't
feel like it's a bravery thing. Like that's how it used to be back in the 70s. The players who ran under the ball were the ones who didn't want the contact from behind. I don't feel like that. I feel like he just misjudges it.
I think so too. And I thought last year it was because we were kicking it over his head, but I think he does it. So
and if you look at even his best marks, like the one he took against Lions, it's with his back really arched, as if he's sort of having to stretch back.
That's the way he goes about it.
Yeah, it's the way. Yeah.
Well, I lumped Cross and Henderson together, so you could probably throw Laurie into the same category as well. They're all holds for me. They fill the same depth role as small forwards. Henderson showed a bit early last season. Cross did a couple of nice things in the game that he played in before he got injured. And they all prefer solidly at Casey. I don't think any of them are going to be superstars. They're more your depth role players, and I'm probably a bit more bullish on Cross, but the proof will come when he gets another opportunity. And one thing I really like about the coach is that he's not afraid to give these types a crack. He just gave Cross a game out of nowhere. So I like the out-of-the-box thinking of the coach. So I'm happy to back him at the moment because things are, Things are working. We're winning, and the game's fun. And after in the next 3 weeks, I might have changed everything if we get some beltings, but we'll see. Boys, I don't know. You can talk about them separately, Cross and Henderson, or together.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with either of them, quite frankly. They're obviously good quality VFL players. That's why they were selected. I don't think they'll progress much beyond that. Yep. What's been disappointing for me is. I don't think either of them suit our needs, both now and in the future.
Well, completely disagree on Cross.
I haven't seen enough of him yet, so
Well, I'm buying every share that there is around Cross.
Okay.
As I said, when I saw him, I saw that game at the Whitten Oval against Footscray, and I made the point that his attack in the ball in the air is unbelievable, and he was leaping at everything. And I suspect that's the role that he'll play. In fact, I think he'll come in this week. Is that I think he's got a huge future, and where he fits in this game plan is he's super, super fit. Like he is really, really fit. And then when you hear King talk about him, it's the very first thing he says about him. His athletic profile is amazing. And he is incredible above his head. He's got a huge leap on him. And as I talked about, and again, hopefully people will jerry, is that, yes, we're trying to play fast. Yes, we're overlapping handball. Yes, that's how we're playing. But we are a long down the line side. And if you are doing that, you need players who can bring the ball to ground, and that's Cross. So he's got the perfect combination of a player who can play small but also impact aerially, as he did in the one game he played, where he brought the ball to ground several times. 2, he's good on the ground, and he's a goal kicker. He's a small forward, and we need small forward. You've got Kozzy coming out playing as basically a 80% mid. You need small forwards. Latrell's not playing a small forward. He's playing an up and down the ground high half forward. We need small forwards. Paddy Cross is the best small forward we've got. He's going to be well ahead of Matthews. Bye. He is like, I could not disagree more in terms of him not fitting our game plan. I mean, for God's sake, he was picked after one game in the VFL King picked him. Clearly he was selected. He came in as a rookie. Clearly he was selected because we felt that he fitted our game plan. King selected him at his very first opportunity after one VFL game. He was in the AFL senior team. What does that tell you? It tells you that they think he's someone who can be in our best 23, and I suspect he will be. Henderson, again, he plays that small forward role. I'd probably, if I had to say one of the two, I'd probably sell. But, again, his advantage is Henderson's super fit. And so everyone under the King game plan needs to be super fit and be able to run 14, 15 clicks a game without raising too much of a sweat. Both of those players can.
All right. Before the preview, I mean, we're closing in on 2 hours. George, do you want to mention anything in Casey? Maybe just a quick, some quick points of play.
Nothing much to report from Casey. We won the game basically in the last quarter. There was only 4 points of difference, I think, at 3/4 time. The stream that we were watching managed to turn itself off for a good 10 minutes as we were actually putting the score on the board against Richmond, who only had 6, I think, AFL listed players in their side. If I recall, I think we had 11 or 12. If you're looking at numbers, there was a really strong breeze to the right of screen at Casey. How unsurprising! What was interesting was the number. Bowie was back for his first game, played half a game, 15 possessions in half a game, which was probably better than anybody else on the field for the whole game. The players who rack up the big numbers, which is becoming quite common, are all playing off the half back line. Your Bonners, your AMWs, even T-Mac, were all hitting Bonner 27, AMW 31, T-Mac 22. So Bowie's 15 in half a game of footy sort of really highlights how well he was, and he just controlled and did what he was just so far above the rest of the players in terms of AFL quality.
Is he back in this week, or is he playing?
I don't think he will be. Probably needs another week just to get miles into his legs more than anything else. That'd be nice if he was, but I don't think he will be. Up forward, Amu. He is an absolute Adonis of a bloke, but the knock on him is that he's got no endurance, and as a result, he goes in and out of games in a big way. We passed over him in the pre-season draft. We had the opportunity. The thing is, he's still only 18, so if he wants to do the work, an AFL side will pick him up because he's an absolute man mountain. T-Mac, 22 disposals down the back, and sadly Adams playing basically in that half-back sort of backline role only had 12 disposals for the game, so not a great upside given the opportunities that everybody else around him was able to achieve. So, not much to report other than that.
All right, well, let's get on to a preview. The Demons are back on the road again for the 3rd time this season when they take on the red-hot ladder leaders, the Sydney Swans at the SCG. And our record across the border this year is not great, with the loss to the Dockers in round 2 and then the gather round disaster against the Bombers. Can the Demons take another big scalp and stake a claim to become a more permanent resident of the top 4? Doug Reamer asks, can our game plan stand up against Sydney and Hawthorn? Both sides look like they're already evolved beyond the run and gun phase. And as we saw this round, they know how to shut down a forward handball game with relentless pressure. Sydney did it to a degree against an injury-hit Bulldog side, but Hawthorn really showed the blueprint against a full-strength Suns outfit. I think the next 3 weeks against the Swans, Eagles, then Hawks will show exactly where we stand in the competition. Win 2 of these 3, and bar an injury plague, we'll be playing finals. Or at least a wildcard spot. George, followed by Binman, your selection previews of this match, and if you want to answer Doug's question about whether our game plan stacks up against the Swans and the Hawks.
We'll worry about the Hawks in a little while. The Swans are going to be interesting. They're at the top of the ladder for a very good reason, even without Errol Goulden in the side, who's probably their best kick. They'll probably have Heaney back this week just to top it off.
Always.
And they're playing on the SCG, which really suits their style of play. They attack straight through the corridor, straight up the middle. There's no point going around the wings because there are no wings, which is going to limit the way that we play in the sense that we're looking for space and to be able to move quickly. I don't know that we can match them. It's going to be interesting because Sydney is that sole team in that top six that don't use two ruckmen. They use Grundy with a couple of the Logan McDonalds to fill in the ruck role when they need, which again probably suits the SCG. You don't need the ball going out quickly. You just need to bring it to ground where they utilise it really, really well. I'm not sure who we're going to be able to put on someone like Blakey, who's a real problem the way he comes out of the back line. He is very fast. I don't know that we've got anyone that can go with him at his speed, and he just drives the ball straight up the middle and right into the arms of people like Curnow. That's the second problem. Who do we play on Curnow?
Got about him.
My best guess is T-Mac. I don't think that we've got another backman who can physically match it with Curnow. He's not a great leading forward, but his muscle power is, I think he kicked 7 goals this week probably, which 5 of which were on Buka Karmas, who's of a similar sort of build to Howes and Disco and Jaff, tall, athletic people, but he just mongrels people, just monsters. I'm sorry, with his strength, and I think unless you bring in our T-Mac, we haven't got anybody else who's going to be able to hold him.
Is Stephen May available this week?
That's who we would have. That's exactly who we would put on him in the past.
The thing, though, about that game against who'd you say played him?
Buka Karmas was on for about 5 goals, and then they put Bailey Dale on him for a couple, and he failed miserably.
Yeah. But it actually points to a bit about the game plan. Is Buka Karmas they set up. He didn't play man-on-man at all on him. He played 10 metres in front of him, and their game plan, the way they set up defensively, the Dogs, they don't play man-on-man. They take up a really aggressive defensive, and he kept on getting burn over the top. For at least 3 of those goals was nothing to do with wrestling. It wasn't a man-on-man thing. It was kicked over the top of Buka Karmas's head, because when they get their overlap running going, that's what exposes. And if you're not playing back shoulder, as they talk about, then against them, then that's what will happen. That's what happened in that game. Is Buka Karmas wasn't one-on-one wrestling with him. I think Turner is the only it will go with him. I don't know. I can't see him bringing T-Mac back in. Maybe, I don't know, but it was interesting what they did on the weekend. It wasn't a particularly tall forward line that we were dominant forward line. So, we probably would have paid May. Maybe. The thing is about you need to have those players who can run off players. I think Disco will take him. But yeah, it was Buka Karmas was playing miles in front of him, and they just killed him every time they got an overlap, like Blackley running through the centre, creating that overlap run, and then they were kicking it over the top of Buka Karmas' head, who kept on having to turn and run with the flight of the ball and was getting killed. So the answer to that game plan, part of our thing is stopping that run, getting that pressure and not allowing those pinpoint kicks. In terms of the game plan stacking up, spoiler alert, we'll unpack that on Friday. Just a short version of that is I've been really impressed, and I made this point last week on the Stats File podcast, that King is, as I mentioned before, a lot more strings in the tactical bow and in the game plan than you might have thought at the beginning of the season. One of the other people I've been enjoying listening to on radio is Simpson. Does a thing on SEN on Monday morning where I forget what they call, but it goes for about an hour with Waitley. And he's mentioned this several times in the last few weeks, that he's concerned about Melbourne. We were a one-trick pony that was all about outside run and the overlap handball and excitement and moving the ball quickly, and that his question mark after 1 or 2 games after the Saints game was whether that would stand up and you get the sugar hit, But he's made the point that I made last week on the podcast a number of times now, that in the last couple of weeks, is that he's coming around on that. In fact, we've got a lot more grunt than he thought we might have. We're a lot harder at it. At the end of the day, as Doug Reamer notes about pressure is still king. If you watch the good teams play, you watch Brisbane, what they did to Adelaide, as much as anything, it was about their physical intensity and their physical pressure they applied. That's what we're going to have to do to have any chance of beating the Swans, any chance of beating any top four side, is to be totally switched on physically in terms of pressure level, intensity level. And if we can be and run with them, we're in this for sure. What I'm excited about this game is our game plans are really, really similar. A great irony is Goody's his director of performance up there, and part of his responsibility is strategy and offense. Specifically, that's part of his job description is offense. And it is ironic, given the sort of stereotyping him as a defensive coach, is that he's credited with the implementation of this new forward handball. So they're nuts in terms of their forward handball meters gained. We're playing a very similar model. But I'm really, really impressed with King tactically, and I think we've got a lot of gears that he's been using, and it'll be really interesting to see whether we just go head-to-head with our running game plan or we look to mitigate their strength. And I think we'll look to mitigate their strengths in the same way that we did against the Suns, when we're averaging 280 metres gained by hand every match. In that game, I think from memory, it was 63. The Swans did something like 800 or 700 metres gained on the weekend. So they will be looking to do that, to run the ball in waves, particularly, as George said, through the middle of, they're the only team in the AFL using the corridor regularly. We'll look to clog up the corridor and try and take that away from them and really, really put pressure on the first handball receive. I think that tactically will be the key thing. I think we'll play a similar tactical game as we did against the Suns. So I don't think we will go to head with them on a running thing, though, but it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. In terms of ins and outs, I've got no idea. I've been wrong on this all season, so I'm going to just not even make a prediction.
All right. That's where I think we're going to leave it for tonight. Demonland Podcast will return next week to wrap up that Sydney game, and look out for our own Big Man Stats Files preview podcast in the coming days, later in the week, Friday. If you enjoy a deeper dive into all the stats in the lead up to that Swans game. So also keep an eye out for our very special podcast entitled The Spirit of 26, which chronicles the 1926 Premiership season. That should be out next week. Thank you to our 5-star reviewers on Apple Podcasts. Thank you to JT Smasher and Molliagle Boy. As always, your questions and comments are an integral part of the show, so thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. That's thank you to Master Chief, Mandalorian, Wiley D, Pedal, Sam6172, Radelaide, Rue Beauty, Monocular, our own Bidman, Doug Reamer, El Diablo 14, Red and Blue Beard, and What Say What. Thank you to my co-host George Midman, and once again, thank you for holding down the fort while I was away. Thank you to you, our loyal listeners, and don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll read it out and give you that shout out on the next show. Go Demons!
Go Red Leggers!
It's a grand old flag, it's a high-flying flag, it's an emblem for me and for you. Well, it's the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we sing a song for you. Should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on the red and the blue. Where the team played fine in the year 39, we're the team that no one can lick. And you'll find us there after the final bell with the spirit of 1926. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we sing this song to you.